Good evening, Broncos country. Welcome to another edition of Bourbon, Broncos, and No BS. Of course, brought to you by Breckenridge Distillery 5280 blend Broncos blend. This stuff is freaking delicious, guys. My bottle's empty because I drink it so fast. Seriously, go grab yourself a bottle, guys. And if you haven't already, fill up your glass and let's start talking some Broncos football. You know, we got the best fans. We also got the best co-host. 𝗕𝗿𝗄𝗏 is with me tonight. 𝗕𝗿𝗄𝗏, good sir. How are you doing, buddy?
You know, I'm good, but we're in that lull time where there's nothing to watch. There's no football, man. I don't know what to do with myself. I find myself deep diving on trade scenarios and free agents, and I'm like, okay, what can the Broncos be next year?
Yeah, I'm already like making videos like, oh, we're going to be the top of the AFC West. And it's like,
oh, man,
it was just the first Sunday without football. And that's always the worst. It's always the worst because you're just like, I have nothing to do with my life now.
Yeah, no, I'm still talking crap to Chiefs fans, though. So,
oh, well, they kind of deserve it. And it's so beautiful to see. People were saying the Super Bowl was boring this year. And I'm like, not when they were showing the faces of the Chiefs players. Like those were like some prime highlights.
Oh, that's gonna be poster up in my room. You know, trust me. You'd see in the back of 𝗕𝗿𝗄𝗏's freaking camera here soon, guys.
Freaking awesome, guys. Well, we got Clayton up in here. We got some other people joining, guys. Post your comments and questions tonight. We're primarily going to be focusing on NASCAR now. That's probably the next thing to really focus on. Maybe hockey. I just need a sport to watch where people are beating the crap out of each other. And playoff hockey, there's no shortage of that. Yeah.
United States, Canada,
water.
everybody. Watch United States, Canada. They get a rematch. So if we want to see some fights.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to, 3 fights in the first 9 seconds?
Yeah.
And hearing the guys talk to the refs, they're like, that was all organic. That wasn't planned. Nothing. That's just how it happened.
Sign me up.
Hockey is a beast. But anyway, guys, before we start talking about wide receivers, let's talk about some of the news coming out of Buffalo. The rumors are Von Miller will probably get cut this year. He's looking at having a $17.9 something million cap hit against the Bills if he stays there. Kind of makes sense for them to release him based off some of the other cap issues they have. Question then is, here's a guy, end of his career. What's he going to do? And all of us here in Broncos country are like, Von, come on home, buddy. Come on home. So, 𝗕𝗿𝗄𝗏, what are some of your takes on that?
You know, when Von was when he was playing for Buffalo, he was very efficient. I mean, the hard part for him was that he didn't necessarily play a lot of the season. And what we've seen over the last kind of year and a half for Von is that he's had a hard time staying healthy and staying on the field. But they've been putting him in those situational pass rush situations, and he was the most efficient pass rusher on that team, if I'm not wrong. They were a team that didn't have a lot of sacks. So if he's coming at the right price, I don't see why you wouldn't bring him in for that situational situation. I think the only thing that I would say is a con for it is that we have these young guys that are getting those minutes and they're developing at a much faster rate or at a much higher rate than we thought. So it would take minutes away from them. But I still think his presence in the locker room would be beneficial to those guys.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this before the show. Think about the experience that he could impart on those young players. But that is the downside. You know, you want to get these young players as much playing time as possible. I mean, every time they're out there, that's another experience that they can learn from themselves firsthand. And when you only have 53 roster spots, that's not a lot of room. So is it worth having one other guy out there for morale, for leadership, when it's kind of like a 1 year, maybe kind of a deal? Or is it just, hey, time to retire and retire as a Bronco as we fully expect him to do? Because just seeing some of his comments and posts from, the last few months, it's very clear that he still absolutely loves the Broncos. But that's going to be a tough one, man. I mean, I don't personally see Coach Payton doing that, but it's a possibility.
It makes me think about what Leggy was saying when we had him for the fan appreciation. What he wants to see is if Payton will continue this youth movement that he didn't have an option to when he was in New Orleans. So if we keep on this particular trend, I don't really foresee it happening. But of course, we know that Sean Payton may just lean on in some of his old ways. There are some Saints players, there's some Saints people that are rumored to be coming to us. And of course, we just got 𝗕𝗏 at the special teams coordinator. So maybe a little veteran presence may be what they want for this particular team, especially maybe not even just for the plays, but for the locker room presence.
Right, exactly. And we've kind of had those conversations over the course of the last year, like who's the leader, who's the voice of the team. And it's like, we heard things coming out of the locker room, like maybe Bo a little bit, but again, when you're the rookie and you're just trying to make sure that you're good, I got to make sure that I understand what's going on. It's really tough to also be the guy that stands up in front of the team and is kind of telling people what to do and motivating them that way. Now we expect that more from him this next year, right? And I fully expect that to be the case. Where Bo will be like the number one and actual true leader, vocal leader of the team. More than just he wears the C because he's the captain. Like he's going to wear the C because he is the captain. But to put that only on him, like we still need more leadership and to have somebody on the defensive side of the ball to kind of show these guys, hey, I've been around the league. I've won Super Bowls with multiple teams. I've been in these situations. Let me, you need to listen to me kind of a thing. And that's really not somebody we have right now on the roster.
Right. I think a little bit of Jonathan Cooper stepped up a little bit for us at the end of the year, and maybe Nick might step up too, but I don't think that they could be as, powerful as having a Von Miller in the locker room.
Yeah. Now, kind of leading that in. Now, guys, we're going to leave that conversation where it is right now because we're just going to have to wait to see how that develops. One, is he even really going to be cut from the Bills? That's going to be step one. And then we're going to have to really talk about what is he going to do. So let's pause that conversation for now and move this over into the wide receiver room where talking about leadership and some of the rumors and news coming out of the Broncos there, Courtland Sutton is not expected to be re-signed with the Broncos this season. And if you're talking about somebody who we thought was maybe one of those leaders, losing him would be pretty big. But Spotty, what are some of your thoughts and feelings in general when it comes to the wide receiver room right now?
It's incomplete. That's probably the biggest thing that we could talk about. When it comes to all of our pass catchers, it's incomplete. I think the move on Courtland is less about him and what he's done for us the last couple of years and more about where the team kind of wants to be over the next 2 or 3 years. They don't necessarily need to re-sign him this year because he is on contract this particular year, not a free agent. And then they could probably work something out throughout the season. But he's going to have to come out pretty hot, I think, for us to get that. But when we're talking about people who was on the team that's done it for us, that is old reliable, I think it's Courtland. And I think that he has a plan in the he's a plan that Payton has. We've seen that he was the most trusted person on third down. He was the most trusted person downfield. Those are the kind of players that you need for a young quarterback like Bo. I don't foresee Sean trying to take that away from him unless something else develops. And I just don't see another player in the particular room that's going to develop to the level that Courtland is at right now, or even potentially be even with another year worth of experience.
Right. Exactly. Brad, I knew as soon as I mentioned wide receivers, I'm like, Brad's spidey sense is tingling. He's out there. He is going to be chiming in about Jerry Jeudy. Look, Jerry Jeudy, it is what it is, not with the team and not part of the picture moving forward. I think he's going to continue to do good stuff out there in Cleveland, but you know what Cleveland does? They just don't do much of anything. So, but let's see, every down year kind of for Courtland. Yeah, I mean, hearing some of these names people are throwing out when it comes to potential trade. I mean, there's that guy from the Bengals. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. T. Higgins, thank you. And a lot of these names are just, maybe they're good quality, but they're not always healthy. And how many years, guys, have we gone through this cycle of free agents that we bring in that just have a history of not being healthy? And when you already have that chemistry there between two players like Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton, yeah, like you're saying, Spotty, is it worth messing with that going into sophomore year? Because we always hear about the sophomore slump. And you're talking about one thing that could really hinder him taking a step back is losing somebody like Courtland Sutton.
I mean, I agree. Touchdowns, you can see it in touchdowns. He was the only guy with 1,000 yards, receiving for us. The most amount of catches. He's been our all everything for 2 years with Russell Wilson at quarterback and Bo Nix at quarterback. I think he'd probably appreciate it a little more to have Bo. He wasn't getting some of those wild things though, but wild passes. But Courtland is consistent for us. We know what we are going to get when we get Courtland. And then, of course, the biggest thing about it is that he schemes so well for Sean Payton because he blocks. And Brad, yep. I know you like to talk about Jerry Jeudy, but that's one thing Jerry Jeudy did not do. And if we know that Sean Payton's going to put players on the field that are going to block, and that's why we didn't see Marvin Mims, last year. It's the reason that Jerry Jeudy had found himself in another spot. We need players that are not only going to make plays downfield, but also they're going to go out and they're going to punch somebody in the mouth.
Yeah. Michael, right here, I'd like to think Courtland could be a good mentor for our young receivers and hopefully even elevate their game. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about this is an off season where, these players are talking to each other, and they're hopefully they are watching the tape and learning from each other and seeing, hey, Courtland's having a lot of success with Bo. What do I need to get to that level to be more like Courtland, to be somebody that Bo trusts throwing the ball to? And we have the potential. I mean, Vele alone, and then you add Mims, who really kind of stepped up at the end of the season there when they started adding him into kind of that run formation and to kind of get things going with the run game and seeing him be more of that joker role. The talent is there, the potential is there. And I think, again, we go back to really wanting to give these guys as much experience as possible. It just doesn't make sense to go out there and trade a player that we really like to get another wide receiver. It doesn't make sense to draft a wide receiver necessarily very high, unless we're just kind of at the, draft the next best available player, and that's a wide receiver. But I don't think we're going to go out of our way necessarily to get somebody when we already have, maybe it's incomplete, but it's a pretty good foundation for what we already have. So why mess with that foundation as soon as it starts to form? You know what I mean?
And that's all we're trying to build. We're trying to build continuity as a team. This is going to be, we're going to go another year in a row with the same coaching staff. Like that's amazing. That's the first amount of continuity. And then we're also talking about a second year with the quarterback starting for us. I mean, that in the last 10 years, only Russell Wilson has started more than 2, seasons with us. I do believe that the continuity is what we need, and we need to keep Courtland to be able to do that. But still, also at the exact same time, I think his health is in question as well. So the reason that they haven't signed him to another contract is that they probably want to see him put another 16 games, 17 games played before they say, hey, okay, we're gonna count on you for the next couple of years.
Yeah, and there are some other, I think, higher needed positions on this team other than wide receiver. And one, running back. I mean, that is absolutely, I think, number one. Closely number two is a tight end, right? And then maybe you're talking about cornerback kind of position. So maybe fourth on the list of really needing somebody's wide receiver. So I could see this being a really big talking point this time next year, when we have even more cap space available. And this is the first year in how many years we've had all of our draft picks, right? Maybe next year we use some of our draft capital to make some moves. Now, Brad says he'd like to punch Peyton in the mouth. He'd love a 1,000-yard receiver right about now. Hey, you forget Courtland Sutton had over 1,000 yards this year on 81 receptions. So he already does have a 1,000-yard receiver.
That is true, but
that blocks.
Yeah, that is true, but I don't think we had anybody else that had more than 600, more than maybe even more than 500.
Yeah,
so
we can bring that up.
I trust me, I want more than 1,000-yard receiver. Is that what's selfish? That's the next thing that I'm looking at for this team. How about another player that has more than 1,000 all-purpose yards? I mean, let's you take Bo out of the mix, he's going to get his passing yards, but I'd love for somebody to have 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000-yard receiver. We've seen it in this current NFL that it is highly possible to have 2,000 yards and 1,000-yard rusher, and those are the truly efficient offenses in the league. And if we can build something like that, I mean, kept Danny right. The running back's probably the number one spot for us, but also at the same time, it's the one role that a lot of teams don't look at until later. And so that player is probably going to be a drafted player, and they're probably going to be drafted in this, second, third, fourth round for us too. So I do actually believe that wide receiver is going to be something the Broncos are going to pay a lot of attention to right now, especially because the longer you wait on wide receiver, especially in free agency, the more money that they're getting paid. I believe Ja'Marr Chase is probably about to become the highest paid wide receiver, breaking the record Justin Jefferson set last year. So every year, these wide receivers are making more and more money, and I don't think the Broncos want to pay a premium for anybody. So they might just jump into that water this year.
Right. And again, we have more cap space this year, but we don't have a lot of cap space this year. And this is the second year of a full, complete, strip it down to the bones rebuild, right? So there's no immediate rush. And we saw Bo Nix has done a great job just by him being him. It's putting us 2 to 3 years ahead of schedule. But that doesn't mean we need to overcorrect and overreact and say, oh, now we're in our Super Bowl window. Hold on. We still need to get the rest of the guys around him experience. We still need to get all the right pieces in place. And it starts with the run game. It starts with a tight end. It starts with a cornerback. Those are the positions we need to really be focusing on. And also, don't forget, Broncos were third in the league, I think it was, when it came to dropped passes. So how many of these players that only had 400, 500, 600 yards receiving would be closer to 1,000 had they not had so many drops?
Yeah. I mean, you can't even – I don't even understand how you have as many drops as the Broncos had this last year. And not even just drops, but drive-killing drops.
Yeah.
I felt like every, at least 1 or 2 drives a game ended with, hey, that was something that actually could have been caught, not just like a bow overthrow or anything like that. It's something that
exactly
could have been caught. Yeah.
Hit them in their hands and then poof.
Right. For once, I am going with, after all the things that I've looked at with Sean Payton and George Payton, I am very comfortable in leaving this in George Payton's hands. The man has been incredible. I know we want to talk crap about him, and we were talking about him potentially looking for a new job at the end of last season. But this draft class, again, made it a point that he's like, hey, by the way, I have how many? 4 All-Pros in the last 4 or 5 years for the Denver Broncos. And if you can continue to draft an All-Pro every year, the next thing you know, you turn around and you're more like the 49ers or the Eagles, of course, who the reason they won the Super Bowl was because of all the drafted players they had. Now, granted, they had a lot more capital than we've had in a long time, but hey, it's all about getting those first, second, third round guys and them starting, not only starting for you, but all, reaching above their levels where they were even drafted at.
Right. But and you look at the recent draft success that George Paton has had. And I completely agree. I was one of the ones saying, George Paton is on the hot seat. That Russell Wilson fiasco really put a mark on him, and rightfully so. But I think, not only did Bo Nix and his success really shine a positive light on Sean Payton, but really helped the idea, and reinforced the idea that George Paton knows what he's doing when it comes to drafting players. And that's part of the reason we got him, right? If I'm not mistaken, the Vikings, right? And just the success they had through the draft there, and saying this guy knows how to draft. And that was such a long period of time the Broncos had where we just could not draft. I'm going to say even during the Manning years, because the Manning years, there was a lot of success of the free agency where people wanted to come play with Peyton Manning, right?
Oh, John Elway, we love you, but not as a GM.
Not as a GM, man. Cannot draft to save his life. I mean, let's not start with Paxton Lynch and blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
I like my tall QBs. That doesn't make him good.
And we did that with our first round draft picks. Hey, that's the one thing that probably we talk about. I mean, Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning, 6th and 7th round draft picks, guys. I can't complain. Quinn Miners, I didn't even know who that guy was before we drafted him, and now
Exactly, man. Exactly. Look, there's a lot of I think rumors that are going to be coming around, especially free agency time period. Just hearing some of the verbiage that Sean Payton has used in recent press conferences, I do not expect there to be any major free agency signings. Maybe one if somebody comes for the right price, but I don't expect the Broncos to be going out there and trying to sign a splash, major contract with a big name wide receiver free agent. So I would just say the Broncos couldn't. Spotty, tell me if you disagree. I just don't see us again being that aggressive this year.
Again, it all comes down to price, right? I want a fangirl. About the potential of Deebo Samuel, who would be I love Marvin Mims, but he's a bigger version of Marvin at Joker, or Cooper Kupp, who's an incredible wide receiver. T. Higgins, who's a monster. Who else? They talked about Garrett Wilson trades which would never happen. I'm going to go ahead and tell anybody out there who thinks the Jets are going to trade Garrett Wilson, you're out of your mind. I don't really. Those are the ones that I would consider splash moves. It's hard to see us do that unless it's 5th round, 6th round pick, and a lot of those guys that we just talked about outside of T, who's in the works of getting a pretty large contract. All those guys are on large contracts. Deebo Samuel 2 years ago was the highest paid wide receiver, and Cooper Kupp was the highest paid wide receiver even before that. So they got some really, really big contracts, and I don't kind of like you said, Kev Dan, I don't think that's the splash that we want to make. We don't want to throw all of our cap space to hurt players and who are going to be making a lot of money. Now, the only player, and I don't know if I can consider it a splash move, and I know we're talking about wide receivers. He's not necessarily a wide receiver or anything. It's Taysom Hill. I could see, we're talking about that veteran presence. I could see that him coming to Colorado on the cheap, because he's made an incredible amount of money while he was with the Saints. And he's a little bit of a utility, not even a little bit. The man played quarterback, tight end, running back, and punt returner over the last couple of years. And we know that Sean Payton likes players like that. So why not bring him in?
Yeah. You got the Saints connection. Saints are not doing well. You might as well start calling us the Denver Saints. Kind of turning into that. But you know what? If it's successful, it works. But I will tell you, the one splash that I will be making this offseason consistently is when I pour some of this Breckenridge Distillery into my glass. It's 5280 blend, guys. you are going to want to make sure you go buy yourself a bottle. We are sponsored by them. These guys are fantastic. They make delicious stuff. Blue bottle, the orange bottle, made by Ed McCaffrey and I'm drawing a blank on his name. Help me out here, Spotty. Yes, thank you, Gratishar. Those guys helped develop this year's flavors, and then next year we're going to be making some more. So, but Spotty, I think he ended this really well. We're going to be moving on into our tight end discussion next week, and really looking closer at that Taysom Hill potential signing that we could be making there. So that's the one thing I'm probably be looking at very closely when it comes to this offseason. So before we do some closing thoughts here, guys, Jerry asks, let's see. First off, Keith, yeah, this is something we'll talk about next week on Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. He's older, injured. We just kind of talked about that earlier, right? So we'll be diving into that next week. Make sure you come back. Jerry, I'll tell you this. When this episode's over, go back and start over again because we covered this at the beginning of the episode. So we had a little bit of a conversation there. You're going to want to listen into that. Guys, every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, we are live covering the Broncos, breaking down different position groups, different players, different coaches, looking ahead to see what the Broncos could be doing during free agency. We got the NFL Combine coming up here in just, 8-9 days, you said, Spotty?
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting to break down all the news that comes out of that as we prep for the draft in April. So, guys, when big news happens, we get close to free agency and the draft, we're going to be ramping up some of our content here at Bourbon Broncos and OBS, but at a minimum, every Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, we are live. And then make sure you follow us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, also Facebook and YouTube, so you can see all of the other content and little videos and stuff we push out throughout the rest of the week. So let's do some closing thoughts. Spotty, over to you, buddy. What do you think?
One of the last things I kind of want to talk about, and we were touching on a little bit about the draft and combine and all that. I would just say, don't be surprised if the Broncos do not trade or draft a wide receiver with the first pick in the draft. In the point that we are, which we're talking about the 20th pick, guys, because we made the playoffs. Just had to throw that out there real quick. With the 20th pick, I think with the players that are available to the Broncos at that time, there's only about one or two that I could think it would even be there that I think the Broncos would go for. But I think that'd be almost an overreach or an overstep for us. And I just, from what we have seen in the draft over the last, 5 years, we have seen players like the Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was a 4th-round pick, or even A.J. Brown, who was a pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's a 2nd-round pick. We have seen that there's a lot of healthy, very good wide receivers later in the draft. And the teams that have truly done a very good job at that wide receiver position, outside of the mega stars that tend to only go in the top 5 to 10 picks anyways, they found those not diamond in the rough, if you will, in later drafts and use their early picks on truly transcendent players. So I would expect at this point that wide receiver is not something that we're even going to look at the 20th pick.
No. Again, guys, just recognize as much as we're kind of still riding that high from being in the playoffs and we're excited about the future of this team, this takes time, right? We're not in a Super Bowl window right now. The expectation here in Denver, which was reset this year, is playoffs or bust, right? The conversation now is winning a playoff game, right? And then it's like, okay, if we can win a playoff game, we can win a division, maybe we get the first round bye the year after that. Things kind of are trending in the right direction, it looks like, for Broncos country. Chiefs are in cap hell, right? The Chiefs could be losing Travis Kelce, even not look at what, how active he really was during the season. The Chargers are going to charger. That's what they do. And then, the Raiders, okay, they got Pete Carroll, but they don't have Marshawn Lynch. And what has Pete Carroll done without Marshawn Lynch? So it seems like, the AFC West is still right. Exactly. Throw it. What? The AFC West is still going to be a very competitive division, but the Broncos are on the upswing while the other teams at best are the Chargers, the next biggest competition, I would say, honestly, and you just look at what the Chiefs I mean, they barely got through this season. Yeah, their record was what their record was. But how many of those games were like really solid performances from the Chiefs, right? That's not sustainable. What the Broncos are building is incredibly sustainable, and more success in the draft, patience with free agency, getting these young players experience. That's what's going to set us up for a serious Super Bowl window in 3-4 years at most, right? So it's an exciting time to be a Broncos fan after what we've sat through in the 8 previous seasons. But this last one, right, it's going to be fun to see. So, Spotty, thank you very much, good sir. It's always good to have you on and hear your thoughts and everything. To everybody else who's been chiming in, checking out the chat and everything, thank you very much for tuning in. We'll be back next Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Time with some tight end talk. So get ready for it, guys. Thank you very much. And, man, I got nothing left to say for tonight other than this, as we always do, on a very strong Go Broncos. Take care, guys. We'll see you soon.
Do what I like, yeah, I do what I like, yeah, I do what I like. Sipping goose, if it's right, and I go with the flow, yeah, I go with the flow, yeah, I go with the flow, cause I know I'm the show. In the zone, here I go, in the zone, here I go, in the zone, here I go, yeah, they know I'm a pro.